Hey, welcome back, everybody. Our next speaker is Paul McCarty. A little bit about Paul. He had his first ET contacts at 6 years of age, started early. And his entire life, it's been a journey of discovery and evolution, attempting to understand this reality of ET contact. And in all of this time, his contacts have actually prepared him to do what he now does, which is to act as a teacher and an educator. He literally travels the world giving presentations and workshops to try to let all of us better understand that we are not alone. Please welcome Paul McCarty.
Thank you, Bob. Thank you. Okay, can everybody hear me? Okay. So this is my first time at this convention, so I'm very grateful to the organizers for inviting me, for the opportunity to be here to speak to you. My presentation is how can we interact with evolved extraterrestrials and UFOs? How are we shaping the future now? So this is what I'm going to spend a lot of time looking at. It's something that I feel is very topical, very much what's in the hearts and minds of many people who are interested in this subject. For the last 5 years, I've noticed a change in the attitudes of many people. No longer are people only interested in reading about this subject. They want more. They want to have a personal connection to this, personal experience. They want to engage this subject. I get emails from all over the world from people basically asking me, how can I find what I'm looking for? Sometimes they can't articulate what that is, but I know what it is because I'm the same as them. I've had a lot of extraterrestrial connection and contact since the age of 6. So of course I understand that attraction. The desire to pull apart the mystery, to understand what is our personal connection as well as our collective connection to some of the extraterrestrials. 5 years ago, I started to present this information in workshops and presentations. I only did initially 3. I felt that this was a subject that people would listen to, and then we would all move on to something else. I find myself 5 years later still talking about it, being invited all around the world to offer workshops, presentations, discussions about this subject. The reason why it's so popular is because it's reflecting the change in consciousness of people. There is now a new awakening consciousness regarding this subject. I feel a lot of us have moved beyond that area of fear and now wanting to explore more of it. So this is what this presentation is about today. But there's more than that. We've heard at this Congress how at this time humanity is on the verge of entering into the intergalactic community. So how is this going to happen? So we'll explore this. But for me personally, I feel the story goes deeper. I feel there is a responsibility placed on those people now on Earth who are interested in this subject, who are active in this subject, to build the templates for the future. The protocols. What's the next step beyond simply observing UFOs? How do we interact with them? If they were to land, what would you do next, personally? Where does the story go beyond this? And I feel that's what we're doing now. We're constructing these templates and protocols about how to introduce ourselves to extraterrestrial beings, how to understand them, how to understand our own reactions to them. And we'll talk a lot about what happens when people have encounters with extraterrestrial beings. I'm sure a lot of you have had similar encounters. Of course, templates are always useful, but we have to understand that at some point in history, somebody has to write these templates, build them, construct them. A lot of you probably enjoy yoga and meditations that have been around for hundreds, if not thousands of years on Earth. And so what will happen if we go forward 200 years on Earth now, when I fully expect there to be great interactions with extraterrestrial beings? They will be using the templates that are constructed now on such things. Another subject we must talk about is the subject of starseeds, or star children, some of you call them here. These are those human beings who recognize a personal connection with the extraterrestrial beings, the UFOs, that goes way beyond their membership of being, well, human at this moment in time. These connections are very personal, very private. It may be that some of these starseeds have had lifetimes elsewhere in the universe. And so this becomes another field of study. This is something I'm personally very interested in and very busy with. A lot of my workshops explore this area. What are people's personal connections to the stars, to the extraterrestrial beings? It helps us because some of you are having extraterrestrial encounters and meetings that are not abductions. And today I'm not going to be talking about abductions. I am talking about the positive meetings some of us have with extraterrestrial beings, which are there for our benefit. I'm going to talk about what kind of experiences, what happens, and why. Also, this is a special time because humanity is defining itself. This means that if we are to join into the intergalactic community, we have to define what is our expression, what is our gift, what are we going to be contributing to the intergalactic community. If we talk of some of the evolved extraterrestrial groups that you may have heard of, the Pleiadians, the Sirians, the Arcturians, they all have a focus, a flavor, a theme, something we recognize about them that is their gift to the universe, and sometimes their gift to humanity and planet Earth. So what will humanity's gift be? So we're going to talk about that a lot. I have my own personal interpretation. One has already been given. Who here watches Star Trek? Few people. Can you remember the theme that runs through Star Trek about the gift of humanity? How, despite being lacking in many ways, human beings still overcame the challenges through courage, through their ability to get around problems. So that was the Star Trek theme, an interpretation of the gift of humanity. That was defining humanity maybe 40 years ago. But today we have upgraded definitions, fuller explanations of what it is that we can achieve as human beings. Before I move on to my slides, I just want to make some observations about humanity. A lot of the problems that we have with our meetings with extraterrestrials is that we insist on having it from a human point of view. Can you still hear the mic? Yeah. I call this the human trap. Many assumptions that we have as human beings about how things will be when we have these meetings. It sets us back, it puts blocks in the way, so we're going to talk about that a lot. But one of the biggest human traps is the need to understand things before engaging in them. I will talk about the potential that each and every person has in this room to make extraterrestrial connections for themselves, by themselves. And yet a lot of you won't believe that, because you'll go back to the normal human way of thinking, which says that unless I understand this intellectually, unless I'm some type of expert in this field, then surely it can't happen, it won't be true. But in the many workshops that I teach, I show people how they can do these things. We don't need to understand technically how they are done. We don't need to be masters of spiritual science to understand these things, such as telepathy or energies. We simply need to be open-hearted and open-minded about this subject so that we take the steps and make progress. I personally don't understand how a car engine works, but it doesn't stop me from driving cars. It's the same thing with this type of work. If you do not enter into it because you're insisting on having a mental, intellectual approach to it that is satisfied before you take any further steps, then you'll kind of stay in a place that won't really go too much further than that. I don't think people will do that any longer. I feel that people are at the point now they want to make progress with this subject. They want to have their personal connections, their personal experiences. And so, this has led me to traveling the world in the last 5 years. I've given 60 presentations and workshops on this subject. Each time I do one, I'm invited back. People are very, very interested in making this contribution, making this commitment. In Vienna alone, I have a group of about 100 people who are working with me every month now to develop themselves, to explore the extraterrestrial interactions. They're making a lot of progress. We've been doing it for about 4 years. That is the level of commitment that they're showing, and they're making remarkable progress, which I'll outline later on. My personal story is that since age of 6, I've been having extraterrestrial meetings of all kinds and all flavors, because there's many different ways that we can connect to extraterrestrial beings. And we'll talk about this later in the slides. One of the main methods that they have used is a telepathic connection, to speak to me without physically being present. So what is it that they've been saying? Initially, they were teaching me about spirituality, about higher consciousness, teaching me about subsubjects as duality, the nature of higher consciousness. Why have they been doing that? They certainly didn't come to answer all the typical questions that I had and that many of you have. It's because they were preparing me, as they are preparing many other people, to enter into the language of higher consciousness, because that is where our interactions will be most effective. Higher consciousness, I call it a language, but it's more than that. It's not a language as in a written language or a spoken language. It's more like a way of being. And when you are able to understand that, when you are able to engage them at that level, it's a profound union. And this is how an evolved humanity will make more of these connections. One of the greatest questions I always get is, why are they waiting? Why do they not come now? Well, the evolved extraterrestrial beings are waiting for us to learn that language of higher consciousness. I can call it the galactic level of consciousness, because it's shared between the different evolved groups. They use it together with each other. That's one of the reasons why they're holding back to see what progress we can make with this. And so, in a way, the timetable for the kinds of physical extraterrestrial meetings that many people want is in our own hands. The more that we learn the language of higher consciousness, the more that we are sending the signals to the extraterrestrials that we are getting ready for a future where we can engage them at this level. Does anyone like David Bowie? This is a lyric from a song called Starman, written in, I think, the late 60s. Right at the top there. The sentiment of these lyrics very much reflects the truth still that I've been trying to describe, that there is a reluctance, a caution amongst the evolved extraterrestrial beings to engage us in the ways that we want, because there are challenges in such meetings. The big questions that I'm being asked constantly, these are them. These are the things that I explore in my workshops with people. Today I'm going to talk about this subject, but I find that it's even more effective if I engage people in a workshop. Because I'm a channel, I'm able to obtain certain information about people's background, about their energies, their connections, that really goes to answer a lot of these questions, which are the main questions people ask me. But for a lot of you, you will find the answers to these questions yourself. The more that you evolve yourself, entering into higher consciousness, the galactic level of consciousness, there are the answers. You will find the answers for yourself. This very much typifies the way I like to teach people. I like people to have their own personal experiences of these things. I like people to get out of their head and to have an actual experience of this. I call it a realization. And a realization is more than a thought. It's more than an intellectual exercise. When we realize things, we feel it with every fiber of our being. And that's what I need people to have, so that they truly understand these things. Some people say to me, why are you always talking about consciousness? Well, for me, consciousness is everything. Your personal level of consciousness dictates how you interact with everything, not just the extraterrestrials, but we're going to keep to that subject. It influences your thoughts, your emotions, your belief systems, your models of understanding, your behavior, and the level of interaction that you're having with extraterrestrial beings. Let's have some examples of this. There'll be some of you here who are saying, well, I'm very interested in this, but I personally am not having any of these meetings, these connections that you're talking about. And yet when I actually explore the individual cases, the individual circumstances of people, I find there's lots of levels of interaction with extraterrestrial beings. At my workshops, people take photographs. What do they find? Orbs everywhere, particularly when I'm channeling. Some people actually even see extraterrestrial beings standing next to me as I'm doing presentations. Not in their mind, but physically. Little glimpses, little flashes. Some of you have extraterrestrial guides. Some of you are contacted in your sleep. You have dreams in which there is communication, interaction. Some of you have full-blown physical meetings. Some of you, it's more subtle, it's more of a telepathic nature. All of these things are happening. But if your personal consciousness is not very expanded, it means you're not aware of these things. Your focus is not able to detect these things. And that is why it's important that we all expand our consciousness so that we're aware of many, many things. We're aware of these interactions. Let me give you an example of how far we can take this. I've been developing my sensitivity to the energies of extraterrestrial beings. And what this means is that if I place my focus on this, I can find a lot out. I can, for instance, identify where in the room you might have extraterrestrial beings who are part of this experience, but not that we can't see them through the physical eye, but they're close to us, perhaps in another dimension. I can detect starships, spaceships that are close by, who are supporting a conference or a workshop. I can communicate telepathically with perhaps an extraterrestrial being that's wanting to come in to give a message. These are all some of the things that human beings have the potential to do to increase their interaction. But in order to do these things, we have to expand our consciousness. We have to be aware of more. Let me talk about one of my favorite subjects, energies. Here we're talking about the unseen world of energies. The aura, chakras. Most of you are familiar with these things. There's a machine next door, I think, that can measure your aura and give you some feedback on these things. Well, for me, being quite sensitive to these energies, it has opened up a whole new world of understanding. It is a tool that I use greatly. And I encourage many of you to develop your own sensitivity, because this is one of the ways that you enter into galactic consciousness. Every being has an essence that you can sense and feel. It has a flavor. You can recognize it. It speaks to you. This includes the extraterrestrial beings. So if I'm connecting to an Arcturian, I feel that essence, that quality of an Arcturian, which is very different from a Sirian or a Palladian. It's their calling card. It's how you recognize them. I'm not very visual. I don't see clairvoyant pictures, so I rely on this sense of connecting to energies, detecting things in this way. And many of you have this facility as well. But there is no end to where it goes. Let's have some examples of how it can be used to develop your own interactions with extraterrestrials. Well, for a start, if you recognize the energy, you know which group you're dealing with. For instance, if you see a UFO, you can connect to the energy of that UFO, the inhabitants of that UFO. If you recognize the energy, it tells you who they are. I've done this myself. If you don't recognize the energy, then it's something to explore, to add to the list of things that you're learning about. It also helps you to understand each other. A lot of you are starseeds. A lot of you have these connections to the stars. Very often I can detect the different influences within people, simply because that energy is in there. It's a part of them. They bring it into this world. But you can use it in a lot of ways. You can use it for discernment, because a lot of people are worried about this question. Who am I connecting to? The good guys or the bad guys? How can I tell the difference? Well, this is one of the ways. If you're connecting to evolved extraterrestrial beings, you will feel it. Your emotions, for a start, will speak to you about this. Your emotions are a feedback system that tells you what you're experiencing. So if you're connecting to an evolved extraterrestrial being, go first to your emotions. What are you feeling? Are you feeling expanded, light? Are you feeling a sense of being healed, a sense of love? These are the typical feelings that we get with the evolved extraterrestrial beings. If you are, for some reason, connecting to a less positive extraterrestrial being, your emotions will speak to you. You'll be feeling a sense of doubt, a sense of fear, a sense of being not expanded, but being pulled in, controlled. So these are some of the ways that we can use this ability to sense energies. And in fact, there is practically nothing that you can't do with this. For instance, there is a lot of channeling going around at this moment in time. I am a channel too, but I'm not a big fan of all channeling. I don't read all of the channeling that goes on. Some of it is not of the best quality. It's misleading. And for me, when I'm trying to be discerning about what channeling I accept, I plug into the energies of the channel and of the actual channeling that they've done. You can feel it. It will tell you whether that person is truly channeling, if they are aligned, or if it's coming from their illusion, from their fantasy. The energy will speak to you. And that's the thing about energy. It never lies. It takes you to the essence of something. To help people do this, something I do is I attune crystals, clear quartz crystals, to the energies of different star systems, different extraterrestrial beings. And so what they can do is they can take these home and they can develop their sensitivity until they start to notice these things, until they can detect the different groups that are connected to Earth that are helping humanity. This is something I find very effective, very simple tool for developing this particular skill. Okay. These are some of the categories of meetings. For some of you, you're mainly interested in physical meetings. For others, you've had all of the others as well. Let's talk about the differences. Physical meetings. Well, obviously we detect these with the physical senses. You're seeing things, you're experiencing things at a physical level. Often when we have physical meetings, there is a part of this when we go unconscious. And we'll talk about this later. Why does this happen? And so for some people, physical meetings evade their conscious memory. They have to retrieve the information through hypnosis or through seeing a channel, this type of thing. One of my own physical meetings happened when I was a teenager. I was on my motorbike in the desert, driving along, and all the classic symptoms of a physical meeting happened. They just unrolled the way that you hear people say. First of all, there was a telepathic connection. And I was told my motorbike would stop. And 2 seconds later, sure enough, it did. The lights went out, the engine came off, and there I was in the desert, in the pitch black, all by myself. That was the other aspect of physical meetings, is the interference with electrical devices. Initially, there was a sense of fear. But then, I seemed to sort of just wake up. I had this intense feeling of joy. So I got on my motorbike, it worked perfectly, I turned it on, and I was out of there. But like many people, I just shelved this experience. It didn't make any sense. There seemed to be a lot of information missing. I didn't see it as an extraterrestrial meeting. I just saw it as my motorbike breaking down. That was the end of that. But of course, now I teach about these things, so I understand that this was a classic meeting, and through my channeling, I understand the details of this. Now, a lot of you are having similar meetings with evolved extraterrestrial beings. And so, on one level, you may say, this hasn't happened to me. But, you know, I invite you to try to remember these things, get people to help you with these things. Something that happens to me a lot more is what I call almost physical meetings. This is when I detect an extraterrestrial being coming into my energy field, coming close to this physical density, but I can't see them with the naked human eye, with the physical human eye. This happens a lot. Because we have to get used to the idea that there are many different levels of density. Here on Earth, we're used to this very physical level of experience, and we assume it's like this everywhere else, but it's not. On other planets, even physical planets, it's a less dense environment. Some people call these etheric realms, other people call these other dimensions, interdimensional connection. But what I know is that I can feel them when they come in. I can't see them, but I can sense them. Perhaps some of you have had these experiences. Very often, they are coming close to communicate, to have some type of telepathic exchange with you. When I was 8, this used to happen a lot. At that point, I wasn't very comfortable with this. And so very often I'd be, you know, running out of the room and creating quite a noise and running to my parents. But there's reasons why they do these things. For me at that time, they were trying to get me used to experiencing these different phenomena. They were trying to communicate with me. They were trying to teach me at a crucial stage in my life where the development of my ego needed to be more balanced. And we'll talk about egos later on, the human psychological aspect to interactions. We've talked about dreams, how sometimes we're more approachable in our dreams. And so extraterrestrials using pure consciousness enter into our experience, enter into our dreams to give us messages, to make connections. Very often this is very pleasant. We're largely free of fear in these experiences. At a deeper level, they also interact with the mass consciousness of mankind, with human beings, helping us to evolve. So there's many different planes and levels of connection and communication here. Let us talk about, in order to understand galactic consciousness, we first have to take a step back and understand human consciousness. What is the difference? Humans, even starseeds, even evolved humans somewhat, allow themselves to be dominated by their mind and their thoughts and by their physical senses. And so if something isn't registering with them, with their physical senses, if something is not speaking to them in a human dialogue, a human way of communicating, then it gets dismissed. It is not what I want. It's not what I'm asking for. Many extraterrestrial beings communicate at different levels, and that's why there seems to be a block when we are connecting with extraterrestrial beings. Because as humans, we insist that they come to us as human beings, as they communicate at our level. But of course, they're trying to raise our consciousness to a higher level where we communicate in a deeper way. As human beings, we tend to be very ego-based. We have this construction that we are separate from everything and everyone. For those of you who study spiritual science, you'll understand this well, or psychology. But it becomes a problem in our interactions with extraterrestrial beings because the ego has its defense systems, will deny the realities of anything that is unusual, anything that seems to threaten the survival of the ego. Of course, when you are connecting to evolved extraterrestrial beings, there is this area where they will mirror back any of our unresolved issues, fears, concerns. That is the nature of what happens when we connect to them. It is not as though they are projecting these things to us, but we are experiencing it in this way. And so the ego becomes a problem. We're also very reluctant to use our inner senses. You've heard of clairvoyance, claircognizance, clairsentience. I was talking about these things earlier. Sensitivity to energy. That's an inner sense. There are others too. But this is exactly how the extraterrestrial beings work. They use all of these inner senses. And so there's a bit of a communication barrier if we're saying, you know, I don't go there, I don't do this. I'm only interested in human words, human dialogue. And so, if we are to have even more interactions with extraterrestrial beings, yes, we need to understand the language of telepathy, empathy. We need to be sensitive. Again, let's go back to Star Trek. Who within Star Trek was like this? Does anyone know? Yeah, he was telepathic, but I'm thinking of Deanna Troi, the empath. There's probably a few more as well. Was she not the person who would sense and feel and get an understanding in this way? These are the qualities that I'm talking about. Something else that these extraterrestrial beings, that is obvious when you connect to them, the evolved ones at least, is that they work in what we call a group consciousness. And you've probably heard of that, but no one really defines what that is. Well, quite simply what it is that you have a group of beings who are less interested in their individual identity. And they've squeezed their ego down until it's quite small. They're more interested in the group experience. They're connected to each other, their thoughts, their emotions, their energies. This is why they seem to lack personality. This is something else we don't like as human beings in our interactions. We want an extraterrestrial being to be full of personality, like we are, to make us feel assured, comfortable with what's going on. Without that sense of personality, there seems to be a coldness about them. But that's not actually true. If you can connect to their group energy, their group dynamic, it is full of evolved belief systems, emotions, experiences, and their pure energy is quite beautiful. But if you're not used to it, it can be confusing. Again, this is something I teach in my workshops. Human beings can obtain a group consciousness very easily, very quickly. I practice with people. We sit around and meditate, and even within 5 to 10 minutes, we can create that type of experience. And that's one of the messages I have here today. Everything I'm talking about is inside of you. It's waiting to be developed, waiting for you to switch the switch on. There was on one occasion, when I was in Vienna, in one particular exercise, we were practicing our group consciousness connection. And as I closed my eyes and felt the energy of the group, I couldn't tell the difference between them and some of the other groups of extraterrestrial beings from the point of view of their energy, their presence, the feelings they were giving me. So I know that as human beings, we can do these things. I'm the kind of person that I like to have proof. I like to see these things working. I need to have an actual experience of it. Rather than just talking about these things, I need to road test them. And so this is something I've road tested. I know we can do these things. I'm mainly talking about people like you in this room, in this workshop. But we also have to talk about humanity at large. There is an evolution of consciousness that is taking place. Many of you will recognize the lower consciousness aspects. And this applies to what people think and feel about extraterrestrial beings. And what they think and feel is changing and will change. And this will show you, this diagram, this guide, will show you how this will change. To start with, yes, a lot of the thoughts and feelings were more about fear-based, loss of control, the idea of good versus bad. Projection. This means projecting our desires onto extraterrestrial beings, projecting our wishes. Why do we want to have a connection to extraterrestrial beings? Is it because we want them to save us? Is it because we want them to change the world for us so that we don't have to be involved in this, so we don't have to take responsibility? That's a kind of a projection, and that's been very common in recent years. Let's try and think of some other projections. That we are powerless, that they hold all of the answers, that we are incapable of changing the situation on Earth. We're incapable of evolving into something like they are. That's another projection. But, you know, I feel this is mainly in the past now. I feel that more of us are in this middle category, awakening consciousness. Acceptance of new paradigms and openness to new things. I think a lot of us are realizing that in this area, it's not going to happen the way that we necessarily want. It's not going to happen necessarily when we want or how we want. So we give up insisting that this is how it's going to be. We give up certain assumptions. We become more open. And at that point, we actually send a signal to the extraterrestrial beings that we're more capable of interacting with them and communicating with them because we've stopped projecting, because we've stopped that we're more in a better position to actually understand the truth of what they represent. I call this a state of non-attachment. What it means is that we don't have that sense of neediness, urgency within the interactions with extraterrestrials. They do not have to fulfill our specific assumptions of how they look or how they are, this type of thing. What I've found is in all of the experiences I've had with extraterrestrial beings is it's always different from how I assumed it would be. They take me and others into unseen worlds, magical worlds. You can only access these worlds if you are neutral, non-attached. Because if you have an insistence that it will be like this in this way at that time, you're blocking the possibilities that they have to offer you. Recently, they've been channeling about this state of neutrality that they're looking for. They are actively looking for volunteers amongst groups like this to help them to get their messages to Earth, to help organize events, meetings, physical meetings. And something they're looking for is a sense of neutrality. And what that means is that they're looking for those people who are glad to work in this way, but they do not insist that it has to be on their terms, that it has to be in a certain way. As we enter into higher consciousness, a lot of what I have said becomes your reality, your truth. It's not just something that somebody has said once. There then opens a period of time when we start to focus on ourselves a lot. We start to engage with these unseen worlds of energies, higher consciousness, and within all of that, the extraterrestrial beings. But our focus is primarily on self, not on them. We stop to project onto them and focus on ourselves first. The next stage after that, galactic consciousness. It is the phase, the experience of cooperation, inclusion in the galactic community through alignment. So what does this mean? It means that as a race, as individuals, we are saying to the extraterrestrial beings, okay, I want to join this club. I want to be a part of it. I want to be an active member. How can I do this? What is my role? A lot of the evolved extraterrestrial communities work together. As different as they are from each other, they're working together in alignment. And so one day humanity, I'm sure, will do this within this higher consciousness. Well, let me go back once. Let me go back to this slide. One thing I didn't write down, which is pretty important, is an aspect of this higher consciousness is the difference between knowing and thinking. When we think as human beings, we are analyzing information, we're being intellectual. We're always open to receiving new information. We're in a constant state of doubt, actually, because we're constantly thinking about things. We're not quite trusting anything, constantly chewing something over. Knowing is when you know something, and there is no doubt. If I asked all of you, what is the color of your car, you wouldn't enter into a thinking mode. You would simply know what the answer is. Now, where does knowing stop? Can you know other things as well? Certainly you can. Within higher consciousness, you can actually plug into the intelligence of the universe itself. You can know anything that you place your focus on, anything that you place your awareness on. And so a lot of extraterrestrial beings are not busy thinking, they're busy knowing, because wherever they place their awareness, there follows the answer, there follows the information, there follows the understanding. In human beings, this is very much what we call a right brain approach. The left brain is very good at thinking, analyzing, numbers, facts. The right brain is more intuitive, more able to go deeper, into pure knowing. Okay. Let's go back to this slide, meeting UFOs. What are some of the problems that people have when they have an almost physical encounter or a full-blown physical encounter? Well, when we meet these very evolved extraterrestrial beings, they change our state of consciousness. We go into an altered state of consciousness. It's the law of resonance. They pull us into their way of being. Now, for some people, this is quite alarming. It feels as if they're going unconscious. It feels like they're being pulled out of their body. Maybe some of you have had these experiences before. So what do? They stop it. They panic. They freeze. If we're to have, if we're to be skillful at these type of meetings, if we are to remain conscious in these meetings, we need to be comfortable with having our state of consciousness change. Those of you who meditate are used to doing this. In meditation, you change your state of consciousness. It's an altered state of consciousness. And some people can measure this with the human brainwaves, the electrical currents that you can measure. For instance, the normal human level of consciousness is, as measured through brainwave patterns, is called beta level. As we go relaxed in meditation, we go into alpha level. As we get very relaxed, almost trance-like, we go into theta level. And delta is where we're sleeping. Now, in my experience of working with evolved extraterrestrial beings, they exist at the theta level. So in other words, their experience of existence is more like being in a deep meditation than it is our experience of being very alert, very mental, very focused. But if you meet an extraterrestrial being like this, they will pull you through resonance into that way of being. Now, human beings don't like this. How many of you have been to meditation classes and found that it's something you resist? It's natural for human beings to resist altering their natural state of consciousness. So this, again, this is something I work with people on in the workshops. But it's something to understand about ourselves. It would also be very useful if we don't actually go unconscious in these meetings, because this is very often what happens in physical meetings. We go unconscious, and so there is no conscious memory of what has happened. Also, where we have rigid thoughts about how things are, about our models of understanding of who we are, the universe, how things work. If we are too rigid, then it interferes with the connection, with the communication. Because if we're too rigid, we're denying the opportunity to change our thoughts about something. It stops the experience. It censors it. It blocks it. So one of the questions is, how do we prepare ourselves better for better extraterrestrial connections? And one of the answers I get from them is to be more fluid, to be more flexible with our models of understanding of who we are, is to be able to let go of any preconceived ideas of who you are, why you're here, and what's happening. Very difficult thing for human beings to do. There are some humans who would rather die than change their worldview, their view of who they are, their view of reality. But this is what they're asking us to do. Be very flexible. Because if we're flexible, we can go to the next level of evolution quickly. We don't block it. We can experience more. We can experience more of galactic consciousness. These are some of the areas that I suggest are what we work on. For those people who want to commit themselves to being the people who create and design the templates for the future, who want to have more interaction, these are some of the areas that we can develop within ourselves. The ability to detect, recognize the presence of ETs. Not just to see them physically, but to feel their energies when they're close by. The ability to identify the source of UFOs, so that you understand which group is in which UFO, how are they working, why are they here. The ability to consciously participate in galactic protocols, including meetings. Recently, I've been channeling some information about standardized galactic protocols for when two races meet together, maybe for the first time. How do they do it? There are established ways of doing this, established ways to prepare yourself, to present yourself as a group. We need to know these things on Earth if we're to enter into this future that we're all wanting to participate in. The ability to switch between different levels of consciousness. This is what I've been talking about. The ability to go from beta to theta very quickly. It can be done. I do it myself. A lot of the students in my classes have trained themselves to do this. The ability to communicate with ETs, to notice their communications, to notice that you all have some type of skill or facility to receive information, whether it's through pictures, whether it's through pure knowing, whether it's through an internal voice, if you like. The ability to channel. Another thing I would suggest is essential is the ability to resist human tendencies and to operate from higher consciousness. To avoid all of the things that we've been talking about which block these connections, and to concentrate on the positive, effective approaches. Okay. So why do I do all of this work? It's because I believe in this future. I see it as something that's achievable. Everything I've been talking about today is not a fantasy or an illusion, because I've seen it working in myself and others. So for me, this is the next step. Humanity choosing higher consciousness. Evolved extraterrestrial beings working alongside humanity in cooperation. Templates and protocols of meetings taking place. All kinds of interactions. Humanity to find its skill and its gift. Now, at the beginning of the presentation, I talked about the Star Trek interpretation of what that is, but I have my own. For me, the gift of humanity is to express inclusiveness within diversity. Because human beings, for me, are extremely diverse. We certainly don't work at a group consciousness level. And within unification, within oneness, that expression will be powerful. It'll be something that we can offer to the rest of the galaxy, to the rest of the universe, to show that we've evolved that aspect. That's our focus, our flavor. What is the gift of the Pleiadians? For me, it is balance and harmony. What is the gift of the Syrians? For me, it's devotion and a deep spiritual core that they hold. The Arcturians, what is their gift? Their gift is the gift of spiritual science, to be skilled in working with energy. So each of the planets or star systems offer their own gift to the universe, and that is part of being the galactic community. It's like being a member of a family. But it's not up to me to define it too closely. Humanity will do that. But I see it as two streams of activity here. There's humanity at large, and then there's the group of people gathered here and in other events such as this, who will go and do more than this. These people here will be the ones that are the ambassadors for humanity, as and when we get to the point where much more connection and interaction can take place. So you too will be defining something, defining how these events will take place. Also, when will they take place? Will they take place within 2 years, 20 years, 200 years? It's in our own hands. I call the evolved extraterrestrial beings equal opportunity beings, because they're not discriminating against us. There is no government that can tell you when or how to do this. There is no person who can stand on a stage that can tell you this. You are empowered enough to be able to create these opportunities for yourself, to make these definitions of your contribution to humanity. Also, I think that an interesting aspect of what we're doing here is, as we evolve our own consciousness, we are actually uniting this very dense third dimension, this very physical expression in the universe, with higher dimensions. In other worlds, in other star systems, other dimensions, they don't have this dense level of physical reality. And so what we're doing here is quite surprising to a lot of extraterrestrial beings. They can't imagine how it's possible to evolve in this dense physical reality, which has its own unique problems. And so I see this as a theme, I see this as a focus too. But, you know, it's a personal choice. You all have to decide, you know, how you're going to interact, how are you going to take up this challenge. Okay, so, some things to help you. On my website, which is written in your books and your programs, you can look at some of the information that I've gathered about the evolved extraterrestrial beings. Who are they? What is their theme, their flavor? What do they do for us? You can look at pictures of orbs. People have taken a lot of pictures in workshops of orbs that are around me as I'm working. Again, this shows that sometimes, even when we're not seeing things physically, they're here, they're amongst us. There are some of my services on my website. I do a lot of work with individuals, individually, in groups, in workshops, this type of thing. What I would say is, though, there is a need for more of this type of work. My vision is for there to be training centers all around the world, in every country. And it will take people here in the US to create these, to be the ones that build these. Volunteers who also see this as being very important to develop ourselves in these ways and other ways. Certainly where I go in Vienna, there's definitely a training center. We have a lot of people committed to this who work very deeply in these ways. You will find there are hotspots for this activity. Certainly in Europe there are, in interesting places you wouldn't expect. Maybe here in the US you have some already that I haven't heard of. Perhaps you will build them, develop them. Okay, so that's the main bulk of my presentation. I'll offer you an invitation today. As you are sitting here in the lectures, in the presentations, know that you are joined by extraterrestrial beings. Try and spot them in the room. Where are they? Where can you sense them? Where can you detect them? I'm not saying do that now, but just spend a moment during the presentations. Try to get on board with this. Try to develop yourself in this area. It's not as hard as you think. Also, you know, you may just spend a moment sensing what's outside of this room. Is there a spaceship, a starship nearby? How many? Can you get a sense of why they're here? How are they supporting this convention, this Congress? When you start to see the world in this way, you start to open your inner senses to recognizing these things. Can anyone detect any presences in the room now? Maybe you're too shy to say something. No pressure. Okay. Good. If any of you are really serious about doing this kind of work, I will be coming back to the US to offer workshops. At the moment, I'm doing 2 a month in Europe, and I'm still wanting to come back here. I've already gone to Sedona, Mount Shasta before in recent years, but I'm looking to come back on a more regular basis. But I tell you what, I need some help as well. Whenever I do workshops, I always have earth angels that help me to organize them. And these are the people who pull together the right people, the interested people in this kind of work, who find a place where we can meet, who do the organization, this type of thing. And so if there's any of you that are interested in making this a reality for yourself and others, please do. Contact me and tell me what your vision is, what your plans are, and how you can support this effort, myself and all the people that will benefit from it. In your program, they have actually misspelt my web address. It's Sirius Ascension. They've missed the A out. Maybe you might want to make a note of that if you're interested in going to the website to look at the orbs or to read the information. Okay, so I want to thank you for listening. I wish you every blessing with your interactions with the wonderful extraterrestrial beings, and wish you every blessing when you reach for the stars. So thank you. Have encounters with extraterrestrial beings. I'm sure a lot of you have had similar encounters. Of course, templates are always useful, but we have to understand that at some point in history, somebody has to write these templates, build them, construct them. A lot of you probably enjoy yoga and meditations that have been around for hundreds, if not thousands of years on Earth. And so what will happen if we go forward 200 years on Earth now, when I fully expect there to be great interactions with extraterrestrial beings? They will be using the templates that are constructed now on such things. Another subject we must talk about is the subject of starseeds, or star children, some of you call them here. These are those human beings who recognize a personal connection with the extraterrestrial beings and the UFOs that goes way beyond their membership of being, well, human at this moment in time. These connections are very personal, very private. It may be that some of these starseeds have had lifetimes elsewhere in the universe. And so this becomes another field of study. This is something I'm personally very interested and very busy with. A lot of us have moved beyond that area of fear and now wanting to explore more of it. So this is what this presentation is about today. But there's more than that. We've heard at this Congress how at this time humanity is on the verge of entering into the intergalactic community. So how is this going to happen? So we'll explore this. But for me personally, I feel the story goes deeper. I feel there is a responsibility placed on those people now on Earth who are interested in this subject, who are active in this subject, to build the templates for the future. The protocols. What's the next step beyond simply observing UFOs? How do we interact with them? If they were to land, what would you do next, personally? Where does the story go beyond this? And I feel that's what we're doing now. We're constructing these templates and protocols about how to introduce ourselves to extraterrestrial beings, how to understand them, how to understand our own reactions to them. And we'll talk a lot about what happens when people have. I get emails from all over the world from people basically asking me, how can I find what I'm looking for? Sometimes they can't articulate what that is, but I know what it is because I'm the same as them. I've had a lot of extraterrestrial connection and contact since the age of 6. So of course I understand that attraction, the desire to pull apart the mystery, to understand what is our personal connection as well as our collective connection to some of the extraterrestrials. 5 years ago, I started to present this information in workshops and presentations. I only did initially 3. I felt that this was a subject that people would listen to, and then we would all move on to something else. I find myself 5 years later still talking about it, being invited all around the world to offer workshops, presentations, discussions about this subject. The reason why it's so popular is because it's reflecting the change in consciousness of people. There is now a new awakening consciousness regarding this subject. I feel
Hey, welcome back, everybody. Our next speaker is Paul McCarty. A little bit about Paul. He had his first ET contacts at 6 years of age, started early. And his entire life, it's been a journey of discovery and evolution, attempting to understand this reality of ET contact. And in all of this time, his contacts have actually prepared him to do what he now does, which is to act as a teacher and an educator. He literally travels the world giving presentations and workshops to try to let all of us better understand that we are not alone. Please welcome Paul McCarty.
Thank you, Bob. Thank you. Okay, can everybody hear me? Okay. So this is my first time at this convention, so I'm very grateful to the organizers for inviting me, for the opportunity to be here to speak to you. My presentation is how can we interact with evolved extraterrestrials and UFOs? How are we shaping the future now? So this is what I'm going to spend a lot of time looking at. It's something that I feel is very topical, very much what's in the hearts and minds of many people who are interested in this subject. For the last 5 years, I've noticed a change in the attitudes of many people. No longer are people only interested in reading about this subject. They want more. They want to have a personal connection to this, personal experience. They want to engage this subject.